Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Gilda Hilaire, and I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Salesforce. Welcome to Part 3 of Journey Builder Basics, where you will learn all about Ad Studio, reporting, data view, smart capture, and much, much more. Presented by Natalie Starr and Jason Court, and moderated by Karina Cohan. And just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. We will try to address these during the presentation and at the end. We will also send the recording to the webinar and links to all the documents, as well as an additional QA slide in case we don't get to all the questions in the deck. So please be on the lookout for that email. Now, without further ado, we will get started. I will turn the time over to Natalie and Jason. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Gilda. And welcome everybody to part 3 of Journey Builder Basics. We are excited to walk you through all kinds of different pieces that you can add to your journey to make them stronger and have the ability to do all kinds of new things. My name is Natalie. I am a marketing technical producer at Acumen Solutions. I also write for sfmcgeeks.com, and my co-host is Jason.
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Jason Court, lead application engineer for the Salesforce Marketing Cloud here at the Co-op Group, and I'm also one of the managers of How to SFMC, where you can find all sorts of fun thoughts and topics on how to do things in Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Today, as Natalie has just mentioned, we're going to talk through some reporting, some smart capture, journey entry capabilities, what Einstein can do for you, pausing journeys, some Ad Studio capabilities, and how to use templates to make your journey builder life a little more streamlined. But we're going to start off with a quick recap, where last week we covered cross-cloud capabilities, decision splits using journey data and contact data, how to personalize content, exiting goals, path optimizer, and we're going to dive into a bit more depth around reporting after the quick whistle-stop tour of some of the foundations last week. So I'll pass this back over to Natalie to kick off on some of the reporting.
Thank you so much. So yeah, we started in on journey reporting, but we wanted to give you guys more options of where to go and where to look. Journey analytics can be found on your journey canvas. If you look up in the upper corner, there's a pie chart marked Journey Analytics. This will give you the analytics for email, SMS, and push. Just note that the maximum date range is 30 days. One of the neat things about the Journey Analytics is that you can compare 2 different date ranges. The date ranges can only have a max of 30 days, but you can compare 30 days to another 30 days. One thing to note, though, is you cannot overlap those ranges. So it's just to look at your engagement on either your email, SMS, or push to see how that's doing comparatively. If we go into the emails or into the messaging activities, they also have analytics inside of the Journey Builder UI. So all you do is click on the email activity, and you'll see that it pops up here with the email analytics, shows you a small thing. This is the same place you would go if you were going to update your email. But if you click on view details, you'll see the red bar takes you to the expanded. This is all the expanded information that you can get on just that one email within your journey. Now, you don't have to just go to the Journey Builder UI to get information about how your journey is doing. Analytics Builder has a couple of dedicated reports for Journey Builder. They have Journey Builder email send summary and Journey Builder email send summary by day. The first one shows the metrics for each email in aggregate. So it's going to list out your emails and it's going to show you the stats across the date range. Whereas the second one by day gives you the same stuff that you would get in the first one, but an additional tab that has all of the metrics broken out by email, by version, by day, so that you can really see into the nitty-gritty different pieces. This is a report that's very, very simple to set up. If you're going to pick a rolling date range, pick the version that you're looking for. But the one thing to note on this, you won't be able to see it on your screen. So when it loads, it's going to be a blank screen and say we can't put this up here. The good news is it's totally fine. You just need to export it. There's a couple of different ways you can do that. You can send it to email, FTP, or a snapshot. The Journey Builder email send summaries from Analytics Builder do format really well in Excel, both in Mac Excel and PC Excel. So you can export it in that file format. My recommendation when it comes to these, I like to set these up with a snapshot so that it has a schedule and it's going to run my schedule, once a week. The advantage of doing a snapshot inside of Analytics Builder is it runs the report and then it saves the report in your report definition. So that you could go back in 2 weeks and see that snapshot from 2 weeks ago. If you set it up and schedule it, you can have it automatically run that report for you at the time that you need, and they can send it to you via email, drop it in the FTP, or just keep it as a snapshot for you to access within Analytics Builder. Analytics Builder does have one other report that I wanted to call out. It's called Discover Reporting. Now, the Discover Reporting is a really fancy WYSIWYG that has a couple of quirks. If you go in to Analytics Builder under Reports, under Discover, the one that I'm talking about here is the blank template for email sending performance. Now, the upsides to this is that it'll allow you to pick the different fields that you want to show and in what order or hierarchy. It'll allow you to pull reports together across multiple BUs if you're building that Discover report at the enterprise level. And it'll also allow you to add your own calculated measure. The downsides to this report is it takes forever to load. When you first load it, it's going to go through and it's running through all of the data. So the longer or bigger your database is, it's going to take longer for this to load. When you use this report, save and save often. The good news is that once you've fine-tuned, got the report where you want it with a rolling date, you can do the same thing that we did with the Journey Builder send summaries and schedule it to run a snapshot. By scheduling it, it will do all the stuff in the back end and you won't have to wait for it to load, then pick your fields, and then process. Now, you can't get everything from the systems, so one of the other options to get the data is using the system data views. I'll pass this back over to Jason.
So the system data views are back-end tables that contain lots of events around the various marketing channels and the studios within Salesforce Marketing Cloud. They store data for up to 6 months and can be accessed via SQL queries in Automation Studio. The data views are prefixed with an underscore, and they include sent, open, click, bounce. It will include unsubscribes, business unit unsubscribes. There is a huge range of these system data views, and the benefit of them is that you can link between them quite easily with some SQL queries. So this is a quick overview of how these data views are linked. Anything that is the same color links between the different data views. This is from a really great resource sfmarketing.cloud from Susanna, who has hosted a couple of previous sessions on AmpScript. I'm fully not expecting anyone to be able to read any of this in that, guys, but you can see there are some dedicated data views for Journey Builder with the journey and the journey activity and how they link together between the email channel activities. So you can see on the journey activity, there is the journey activity object ID, which relates to the trigger send object or trigger send definition object ID, which then relates back to the send open click event type data. So I've got a couple of example queries, which we will have as plain text at the bottom of the slides, so you can take these and use them. These are taken and heavily inspired by some of the sample queries provided by Salesforce in the documentation. And in this instance, we're looking to find all of the email sends at a contact level from all journeys in the last 24 hours. And the by contact is probably the biggest element that sets this apart from the analytics reporting and the discover reporting, which are all at a campaign level. This allows you to get to the level of granularity of a specific contact to find out who has received which email, when did they receive it, did they open, did they click it. So if you've got some SQL knowledge and SQL experience, you probably recognize a lot of this. If you haven't, would 100% recommend you spend some time looking through some of the documentation on available from Salesforce with regards to SQL, and spend some time just getting familiar with it, because this does unlock a lot of opportunity to really level up your reporting. And another one which would essentially mimic the sends by day analytics builder report, which is again looking at the journey name, the date, the email name, and the sends. If you were to want to change this to look at opens or clicks or bounces, you see on line 5 where we've got from underscore sent. If you were to change that to open or click or bounce and rename on line 4 where it has sends to opens, clicks, bounces, you would get that set of data at that same level. So it's really useful to spend some time understanding how the system data views work, because that will give you a whole new level of granularity in your analytics to really push what you're doing to another level. But whilst we're talking about contact level analytics, I think it's important that we take a look at contacts and the paths that they could follow through a journey. I'm going to pass you back over to Natalie to cover some of this detail.
So one of the things that you have inside of Journey Builder is the journey history. It's a tab at the top of the screen. What this journey history does is it pulls in data for the last 30 days from your journey. It's going to include the contact, the journey name, what version, the activity, the status. It'll even pull in the cause if it's pulling in a failed status, and what time it went. You can open this up and take a look at all of the different pieces you have, or you could search by a specific email address or subscriber key. You can also use the filters to filter down to look at something specific. The one downside to this report is that you can't export it. But this is a great way when you're working on a new journey and you want to see that everything is working. This is a great way to see instantaneously where those pieces are. When I'm running a brand new journey and I want to make sure that they're going to hit that email and that email is going to go out correctly, I'll come in here and check my test user. I can see that the trigger met. That's when they entered my journey. And then here's the email that I sent them, and the status is complete, which tells me the email has been sent to the contact. If you wanted to go into the journey itself and see where they are in the journey, you can use a new feature under Health to search for your contact. If you go up into the upper corner, you'll see a little suitcase with a plus sign. This is what opens the health menu. In here, you can search by contact key. If they are in a running or stopped journey, you can see exactly what they've done or what they did. The one thing to note, it only looks at the last 30 days. So if you're trying to look at a contact that went through your journey 45 days ago, it'll no longer be inside of here. That is one of those places where you'll want to go back to a query to pull that kind of data. One of the newest features that came out along with being able to search for your contact path is the ability to remove a single user from a journey. Now, inside of Journey Builder, this is something that we've been asking for years and is super excited to have, because there are times where you have a promotional journey and somebody's got an open customer service case and you don't want them necessarily to continue down that journey. So this is a great way to be able to pick one person and pull them out. We get that not everybody is in Marketing Cloud. Many of you guys have integrated apps, clouds. So one of the apps that I wanted to show, this is from the Salesforce Labs. It's available on the App Exchange. There was a webinar on it last week. I will put the link for it in the resource section. But what this is it's a Lightning component that can be added to contact, lead, case, or the account page. It'll show you the journeys that somebody is actively in, and you can pull them out of that journey from your connected cloud. So for example, I can see that my person is in the Lightning Adventures version 9 journey. If I wanted to kick him out of that journey, all I would have to do is click stop. So now that we've looked at all of the different ways to look at people that are in the journey, let's look at another way to get people to start the journey.
Yeah, so we touched on cross-cloud, and we've touched on data extensions as a way of entering people into journeys. But there is another option that can be quite useful, and that is the use of smart capture forms on cloud pages. Smart capture is a simple form builder tool that will directly interface with Journey Builder if you so choose. So in this instance, we're looking at a form to capture forename, last name, and a favorite character of the Salesforce Trailblazer characters. And in terms of how you do that, there's 5 steps. Create your data extension and make sure it's sendable. Whatever attributes you want to capture, get it in your data extension and build it, get it ready, and make sure it's sendable, including whatever relationship you want to have between your data extension and your contact model. So if you're using email address is equal to email address, great. If you're using email address is equal to subscriber key, great. As long as you've got that set up and it's consistent, that's what you need to do. You then need to create your cloud page and your smart capture form, and make sure it's available to Journey Builder by ticking the box using Journey Builder, and give it a really useful name so that when you access cloud pages as an entry source in Journey Builder, you know which one you're selecting. Then create your MVP journey. And there's a few reasons why I suggest you create an MVP journey, which I'll come to. And then activate your journey and test it. So in this instance, the target data extension is your favorite character smart capture journey entry with email address related to subscribers on subscriber key, where we're looking to capture location, character, first name, last name, etc., and the submission time and email address. We then create a cloud page. So some of you may have seen this before. This is some classic Salesforce content, which has some information about various trailhead characters, including Astro, Cody, Cloudy. And then a smart capture form, which is just an element of content builder that you just drag into your cloud page. And you select your target data extension and drag the attributes on that you wish to capture. The one thing that is custom here As you see the hidden attribute at the bottom for submission time, where I've got a little AMP variable for now, just so that we get a date time for when that form was submitted, just in case you want to do any analytics around when someone enters or submits the form and enters the journey. So I mentioned creating an MVP journey, and this is as MVP as it gets. This is just enter, random split, exit. So you can validate that your entry is working as you want it to. With anything that could be entry related, it's far better to identify a problem at an MVP stage rather than a fully fleshed out journey stage. Because as we discussed last week, if you have decision splits that use journey data and you change your entry event, that all needs to be redeployed. So confirm your entry event, make sure it's working as you anticipate, and then start to iterate on your journey. So in this instance, you can see there's 5 versions of this journey and how that's evolved over time, how we went from just a random split into this fully fleshed out journey, which includes decision splits, weights, engagement splits, based on what we would associate with the personas of people who like Cody over Cloudy over Einstein in terms of a contact strategy. So in this instance, we're saying people who tend to like Cody will like small bits of information regularly, whereas people who like Cloudy would rather have a large piece of information in one go they can take and review at their leisure. And as you can see, this was iterated very quickly to go from where we started here to here. And again, we touched on versioning in the first session, and it's just using versioning in this exact same way. So what if you wanted to take something else and really start to see the values of other elements of the platform? So we mentioned there's going to be a bit of a sky-high view of Einstein. So what if you wanted to start using Einstein sum-time optimization in a journey like this, when you create a new version and drop that in? So Natalie, you'd like to start explaining how Einstein can help?
So Einstein send-time optimization uses the Einstein AI to predict when each of your individual contacts is most likely to open an email or a mobile push. It runs a calculation daily, analyzing 20 different factors that relate to engagement, including send volume, open, click. It looks at the last 90 days of your engagement, and it goes through and decides out of the 168 time slots it has available to it, that's each hour for 7 days, what time and day is most optimal for you to send to. The Einstein send optimization has the opportunity to use all 168 if you wanted to go with all the world and you wanted your email to send out at some point this week when Einstein thought it was best. But for many of us, we don't have the ability to let the email deploy over a week. We need to make sure it deploys today. We just kind of want to know what time today would be best. So the way that you would do that inside of an Einstein send time optimization is you're going to use the optimal duration to pick. You can pick buttons that they've already got preset for you, so 24, 12 hour, 24 hour, 48 hour, 72 hours, or you can use the slider to pick where how many hours you would like to keep. It does require that you have a minimum of a 2-hour block. Once you have a block of time and you've decided that, what Einstein does is it looks through its data and will pick the best time within the window that you have selected. What happens then is that the moment your contact reaches that activity, Einstein looks up that time and it starts at the top of the next hour. So if you've given Einstein a 3-hour window, the moment they come to the activity, let's say they hit the activity at 12:30, that 3-hour window will start at 1 o'clock and it'll go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. So your email will go out in one of those slots. One of the recommendations is always to test the Einstein send time optimization, and you can do this with adding a random send time optimization to compare against, or to pick the best time that you already have as a control measure. The send time optimization activity needs to be placed before the email that it is scheduling. So you can have Einstein send optimizations all across your journey. If you've got 5 emails, you could have 5 send time optimization activities, each one directly before the email. Since we've talked about the send time optimization, I do want to show you guys the send time optimization dashboard. I know it's outside of Journey Builder, but if you start using the send time optimizer within Journey Builder, this is something that's really neat, that it'll allow you to see across everybody what the send time optimization is being calculated at. It'll also show you the 3 big metrics around what Einstein is doing, and that's the total email audience. So this is the total number of people that Einstein has analyzed. It'll give you the assigned personal send times. So this is the list of people that Einstein had enough information that could get so he could give a recommendation. And then there's one that's pending personal send time, where Einstein needs more data to be able to recommend something. So this is something that is available if you are using send time optimization. You can find this up in the Einstein tab. The other type of Einstein that you can use in Journey Builder is Einstein Journey Splits. Now, Einstein Journey Splits are tied to Einstein engagement scoring. So you'll have to have Einstein engagement scoring active on your account. It gives you the ability to split your traffic based on likelihoods that Einstein has computed for you. The persona split is one of the ones that I see the most often, and I wanted to make sure to touch on, as it's breaking down your contacts into 4 big buckets. 1, the loyalist, and this is the people who have high open and a high click likelihood. We have our selective subscriber. These are the people who don't open our emails all the time, but when they do, have a high likelihood of clicking. We have our window shopper, which opens lots of emails, but is very particular as to which ones they click. And then we have our dormant audience, where they're not opening our emails and they're not clicking. They're both on the low side. So the nice thing about using the Einstein split type by persona is you can really target those audiences for different use cases. You can also target based on conversion pieces. So for instance, you can split on website conversion likelihood, on the likelihood to click, on the likelihood to open, and even on the likelihood to stay subscribed. If you are doing a win-back journey and on a really old audience, and you're concerned that you might have a spike in unsubscribes, this is one place that you can use the likelihood for retention with Einstein. You can ask Einstein to go through and give you the recommendation of these the folks he thinks are going to stay subscribed versus the ones he think are going to or are not. So if you are sending to an old list and want to try and make sure that you are getting the best bang for your buck and taking the least of a hit, that's a great opportunity. We aren't going to go much deeper than that for Einstein for one really big reason. MVP Elliot Harper just recently did a 4-part in-depth series on everything Einstein. He went over all of the different types of splits, all of the different engagements, content, web, all of those different pieces. And he's been kind enough to share it up on the Cloud Kettle YouTube channel. So we've included a link here, so if you've got more questions or really want to see and understand how Einstein behind the scenes works, we do strongly recommend that you check out Elliot's 4-part series. I know one of the most common questions that we'll get, though, is the use cases. So I do want to just touch on a couple of use cases that you could do with Einstein. So one example, you could do a sneak peek for your brand loyalists. Everybody loves getting something before somebody else, especially when it comes to like a sale. So you could use Einstein engagement splits based on persona to pull out your loyalists. And then you could send your loyalists a code so they could see what is going to be on sale before everybody else. This is a great way to build that loyalty to your brand and to really engage with your top engagers. Another one you could do is personalized promotions. You can use the engagement split based on persona, and you can send different promotions based on their email engagement. Let's say you want to send a different discount based on your window shoppers versus your selective shoppers. Another option you could do is the win-back channel. When you've got personas are going to give you out who the win-back audience they've calculated. And these, again, are the people who have a low open and a low click likelihood. Perhaps this is a group of people that you've only been sending emails to, and you could identify these and try a different channel, such as SMS. You could also do subject line tests. Using Einstein to split out the traffic based on open, you could take the traffic that is not likely to open and do a random split. So you're only taking a portion of that to do your test with. That way you have an audience you can test with that's still at random, but is really in the category of people you really want to have the most effect on, because these are the folks that are not currently interacting with your emails. One thing to note about promotions is that sometimes there comes issues on the set where you just need to turn the journey off for a second. This is where pausing a journey comes in, and I'll pass it back to Jason.
Yeah, so journey pausing is another long-awaited feature. After a very long time, it was announced in the May 2020 release to give marketers the option to temporarily stop contacts progressing through a journey. Previously, you would be required to stop a journey and then work out how to get the people who were impacted into a journey again. But journey pausing does give you that opportunity where if there is an issue with your website, if there is a typo in your email campaign, if there's some kind of other external reason, like a stock issue, that would lead you to say, actually, I need to pause this journey and I need to work out and decide what the next steps should be. Journey pausing is a really useful tool that has been recently added. When you pause a journey, you can pause it for up to 14 days, and you can select whether that time period, when it elapses, whether you should automatically resume the journey or automatically stop the journey. There are obviously different use cases for journey pausing, so just be aware that when it gets to the end of that period, that decision will be made for you. But your journey sometimes have wait steps in. You may have weights by attribute, or you may have weights based on some kind of date. And so you need to be aware of what happens when you pause a journey with wait steps in. So currently, the only wait type that is impacted with a journey pause is the wait by duration. Any other wait will continue to fire as if there had been no change. So if you have an event date that has surpassed, or a wait by attribute that has surpassed, the contact will flow all the way through until they are stopped. So in this scenario, where we have a contact who would receive their first email 3 days after a sign-up date, if they had entered the journey and then your journey was paused because your website was down, there was some kind of a stock issue or an email template or a branding change, whatever it may be, if your journey was paused for 7 days, when that person or when that journey becomes unpaused, you'll see that actually the 3 days after sign up date has elapsed and the 5 days after sign up date has elapsed. And therefore your contact will go straight through and receive welcome 1 and welcome 2 pretty much back to back, without that wait that you may want in order to preserve your customer experience if you spent time crafting and designing. So whereas if you were to use a mix of wait by attribute and wait by duration, in this instance, if the journey was paused for 7 days, 2 days after someone signed up, they would then get their welcome 1 after the journey had been unpaused, but then they would still get that 2-day breathing room before they receive welcome 2. So you would be able to preserve your customer experience that you had spent time designing without jeopardizing too much of the overall campaign performance. But when it comes to journey pausing, there are a few things that you should really be aware of and some best practices. For starters, unless you have a real reason not to set your pause at the longest duration you can, just set it for the longest duration you can. You can't extend a short pause without having to resume the journey first, which does expose you to that risk of I've unpaused my journey, people start moving, I've paused it again. And in that window, it may only be a few seconds, but you can have emails start going out. Whereas if you have a pause for 14 days, you can go in and resume it before that 14 days has elapsed. And try to use, as mentioned before, a blend of the wait by attribute and wait until date and wait by durations to make sure that the flow control is a bit more robust, rather than exposing yourself to anything that is entirely dynamic based on dates that could get thrown out of the window because you've paused a journey for 10 days. And I would also suggest don't be afraid to pause a journey. The impact from a winding down and spinning back up journey builder is relatively small. And if you have a situation where your campaign could have some kind of a negative impact or negative experience for customers, it's better to pause it, check and make them wait for a few minutes and come out to them 15 minutes later than otherwise planned, than it is to send out an email that's got spelling mistakes or incorrect personalization, rather than taking that risk if you're not 100% certain. Just don't be afraid. Pause, resume. It doesn't take long. It's not a lot of effort, but it does give you that comfort that you haven't had up until the May release. But I'm going to pass over to Natalie to talk about some Ad Studio and advertising audiences. Maybe have some minor technical difficulties with Natalie's connection.
I'm back. Sorry about that, guys.
No worries.
So what I was saying was Journey Builder and Ad Studio are a great pair, and we get a lot of questions about how do they work. The biggest reason being it's hard to work inside of Ad Studio without actually having a live ad account on Facebook or Twitter and with a payment linked to it. So if you're not comfortable putting your credit card down, it's going to be very difficult to test with. So I wanted to make sure to walk you guys through some of the information and some of how this works. And we'll go through and I'll actually demo adding a campaign into one of our journeys. So for Add Audience, you can add an audience from Journey Builder that can be used on Facebook, Instagram, Google Ads, LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest. There's additional partner networks that it can also be used on. This is an audience that you can use to target, to exclude, or to create lookalike audiences. These are set up as data extensions so that you can use them both for ad audiences, but you could also access that for other suppressions and other things. The two big things to note about Add Audience. Add Audience lets you add somebody to that audience based on where they are in that journey. So let's say you have 4 or 5 splits and you really want just the people who are in that one path at the end to go into your Add Audience. That's where I would put your Add Audience activity. When a customer exits your journey, they're not necessarily removed from that advertising audience. So one recommendation that I always give is put another Add Audience right before your exit that adds them to a list that you can then use to suppress. That'll keep it from having from continuing to market to those people after they've left your journey. The other type of activity that Journey Builder has that's part of Ad Studio is Ad Campaign. Now, Ad Campaign is only available for Facebook, and it has a few quirks to note. When you go into config, you can define your audience, select your ad, and we'll go through all of this when we actually demo it. But one thing to note, it will need a minimum of 20 matched contents before it will start running the ad in Facebook. The ad will run until your budget runs out. You can edit your budget outside of Journey Builder without having to create a new version, but that change may not be reflected in the journey. So it is recommended that if you are adding, updating your budget or making any other changes like that, that you do create a new version of your journey with those changes. The other thing to note, Journey Builder Ad Campaign does have a way to automatically remove audience members. You can set a retention policy. So for instance, if I only want them to be in this audience for 3 days, I can set that as part of my ad campaign. The other thing to note is depending on what your re-entry settings are, will depend on how the entry happens. Ad campaign only adds the contact to the advertising audience when it consumes it for the first time on that journey. So if you have a journey re-entry anytime or a journey re-entry after exit, once it's already gone through it once, the Ad Studio is not going to pick it up a second time. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So let's actually take a look at what this looks like in Marketing Cloud. So in Marketing Cloud, we're going to take a look at a quick demo specifically on adding an ad campaign to our journey. Now this journey has a single email that we're then going to wait for 3 days so that there's enough time for the contacts to interact with our email. And then we're going to check for engagement to see if they opened or if they did not open. If they did not open, we're going to add them to our Facebook campaign so that we can try and reach these people on another channel. So what we're going to do is grab the ad campaign and drag it onto the interface. We'll go ahead and click in to configure. We'll give it a name. We will select our ad account. Now, please note your ad account must be set up in Advertising Studio before you can select it inside of Journey Builder. We also picked the data origin. We know that the user provided the data, so that is what's been selected. We do have a retention period here, so we are going to go ahead and set the retention for 3 days. So now we're going to go forward and let's configure the actual creative. So we want it to link to a specific Facebook page, and we need to give our creative a name. Now this name stays inside of Marketing Cloud. This is just what it'll be named so that you can find it again for later use. We can add the text that we want to show in our ad. We can add a headline. We'll go ahead and add a URL. but it's a long URL, so display-wise, I'm just going to display the home. And then I can add additional information here. I can in the link description or in the headline. So let's go ahead and add something in the link description. So here you can see that it's starting to populate the preview on the right. You can look at the preview both in desktop and in mobile. We can also add a call to action. In this case, I'm going to pick learn more. That's going to put a nice button onto my ad. We'll go ahead next. And now we're going to configure the campaign. So this is the name of the campaign inside of Marketing Cloud. Then we're going to pick a special ad category. Now, Facebook requires that you identify whether your category is housing, employment, or credit. This ad doesn't meet any of those requirements, so it's going to be an other. We'll need to identify our total spend. The minimum is $100 for Facebook, but I can set the daily budget to 1. So this should run for 100 days. Be careful when you're setting your total spend and your daily budget. If you are going to a very, very specific tight audience, you may have to adjust your budget and your daily budget to make sure that you are competitive to get those people. So here's the view in mobile, since I hadn't had a chance to show it yet. So you can see that is how to add an ad campaign audience to our non-openers. So I have given a couple of use cases of where you could use Ad Studio inside of Journey Builder. Things like lookalike audiences are great. Take your top customers and see if you can find a lookalike to bring in more top customers. You can use Ad Studio to create a campaign to exclude people from your ad campaigns. For example, if somebody is angry with the brand and has an open customer service case, maybe you don't want to spend the money to show them an ad on Facebook. You can also use it for win back. People who have not been interacting with your email or mobile, maybe you can find and catch their attention in social. Mobile app download. People haven't downloaded your mobile app. They might not know that you have a mobile app. So you can add them to a campaign if they don't have your mobile app, doing a decision split, and then send them an ad that says, hey, we have a mobile app, check it out. There are tons of different use cases where Ad Studio can be used. So I encourage you to think about where and how you could use an audience to target, to exclude, or to build a lookalike. So once you've gotten your journey, let's talk about templating. I'm going to pass this back over to Jason.
So we've talked a lot about creating journeys, using journeys, but one of the things that comes up quite frequently is it's a lot of time to build a journey, and if you have to do lots of them, how can you make your life easier? Which is where journey templating comes in. Salesforce provides a range of journeys, templates for you to use, ranging from the simple, like the event follow-up and the path optimizer email A/B test, through to the advanced with abandoned carts and birthday journeys with coupons, which are really useful to look at and great for inspiration. But a lot of the times when you look at a template, it gives you an idea, doesn't necessarily meet your requirements fully, which is where you can start creating your own custom templates. So when you create a journey, when it comes to saving your journey, you have the option to save as template. When you create that template, you get the option to add a description and instructions. And when you create a new journey from that template, your users will be met with, on the left-hand side, the description and the instructions that you have laid out there so that they can quickly deploy these journeys. Now, some elements won't be configured within the template. Obviously, we mentioned journey event data, also entry event data. So things like decision splits using journey data, engagement splits may not necessarily be included, but you would get the full flow included as part of the deployment. You may just need to configure some of the additional elements like emails, decision splits, and any kind of filtering that may be included. But also, there is a great tool, it's the second plug for Salesforce Labs today, with Deployment Manager, which is a free add-on for Marketing Cloud in the App Exchange. And it gives you a lot of capabilities to lift a range of elements from one business unit or an enterprise and putting it into another. So currently, when you run Deployment Manager, you create a snapshot, and you can see on the right we've got a whole bunch of journeys ticked, and you can select as many or as few of the journeys that you want, or data extensions, shared data extensions, and create a snapshot which includes all of the information about those activities. And there is partial support currently for attribute groups and automations. Obviously, standard Salesforce forward-looking statement would apply. But as a free add-on, it's a really useful tool. When you create your snapshot, it's downloaded as a JSON file. And then you can just upload that straight back in or into a new business unit or a new org. So if you're working in a development environment and you need to deploy this to a live environment, you can drag and drop, essentially download it from your development area and re-import it into your live area. So it does speed up a lot of deployment capabilities. So when you upload the JSON file, you get a nice overview of everything that has been deployed and whether it was successful or not. Fortunately, the screenshot to the right says everything's nice and successful, which is great. And these journeys will then be available in the new location that they have been imported to and deployed to. Very quick whistle-stop tour of journey templates. It's definitely a useful thing to spend some time to get familiar with and spend some time on. But I think we've got a few minutes. I'll pass it over for some Q&A. We do have some great resources included in the deck so far. We will be adding some more from various sources on the subjects that we've covered today. Would definitely recommend taking a look at some of the Trailhead resources and take a look at some of the chatter groups as well. Really useful. Spend some time getting familiar with what's going on. There's a dedicated chatter group for Deployment Manager. So if there's any particular features that you are interested in, then make sure you get on there and make your thoughts known. So let's take a quick look at some of the questions we've got.
So we are at time, and I do want to be responsible to everybody's time, and thank you guys so much for joining us. I know that both myself and Jason have really enjoyed presenting this to you guys. Since we don't have a ton of time to go through all of the questions, we'll be going through them and we'll add them to the presentation deck. So when the presentation deck goes out, you'll be able to see the question and the answers all there inside of the deck for you.
Yeah, so we'll go through the questions that have been asked. There's another session coming up, I think it's next Tuesday. I'm not 100% sure what the topic is, but keep an eye out on Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm sure there's going to be some details around that. Another one of the awesome sessions that Gilda's been arranging recently. definitely take some time to go through these resources, look at some of the other events on the calendar, and look forward to doing this again. Thank you everyone for spending some time in the last few weeks with us. It's been a really useful session to be involved in.
Great, thank you guys so very much. And as Gilda mentioned earlier, we will be sending out the recording and the resource list with the presentation after the either later today or tomorrow.
Perfect. Thanks everybody.